Hi, we are broadcasting live for the ELL book chat, and I'm just now posting a new link to Twitter to this chat. So if you're watching the recording, you get to see some bonus footage here of me typing in our new link. Give me 1 sec to do that now. I'm sorry. And then our link. Okay, so we're going to be talking about SIOP components, strategies, and comprehensible input. And let's see, is it going to let me share the link? Yes, it will. And then we'll also talk about some other SIOP components and other SIOP-related things. Hi, Ton and Emily. We are live.
Hey.
And I am putting in the new link to the live chat. All right, so we've got Tan Nguyen and Emily Francis.
Hello.
Hello, and I'm Allyson Newton. And I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves if you would, and I'm going to finish this tweet. The live chat.
Emily, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Emily Francis, ESL teacher in Concord, North Carolina. I teach high school. I taught elementary for 6 years, but now I'm at the high school. I'm about to finish my first year at the high school level. Pretty excited to join our PLN with this SIOP chat. It's been interesting to see the take of everyone and the way we apply it in different continuums in our education field. So I'm excited to learn from everyone and here to share just what I've learned.
And you're going to be the keynote speaker for the SIOP Summit.
Don't say that. My heart freaks out every time I hear that.
We're really excited about that, I got to tell you.
Thank you. I'm excited too. Yeah.
Well, I will introduce myself next. So I'm Allyson Newton. I'm the SIOP product manager with Pearson Pre-K-12. And it's my pleasure to be a part of this SIOP chat. And this video chat is even greater, whatever you want to call it. It's wonderful to be with Emily and with Tan and with all of you on Twitter. And we got some great questions. So more on that to come. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be a part of this. And Tan?
Yep. And my name is Tan, and I currently work at a school in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh, and I work in 5th grade. Let me tell you, if you are an elementary school teacher, my hat goes off to you because there's not a lot of time to plan, a whole lot of kids to help. So I'm impressed.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. I'm going to share my screen, and I've got some slides that we'll talk through. Let's see if I can pick the correct screen to share. And many windows.
Katie.
All right.
Yay. Katie joined us. Hi, Katie.
Katie Toppel. Awesome.
Yay.
Let me unshare so we can let Katie introduce herself too. Hi, Katie.
Good morning.
Good morning. You want to introduce yourself, and then we'll get started with our slides.
Sure. Oh, we're already live. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Toppel. I'm one of the co-founders of the ELL Chat Book Club.
You want to introduce? We're getting that loop again.
Do you have it open? I always do that every time I start one, that I have it open in 2 tabs, and that's why it echoes.
Okay.
So like if you have Twitter open, it might be playing on Twitter. It might be playing in a second window.
Okay. So Twitter. Okay.
I don't hear this one.
I'm gonna close Twitter. Can I close YouTube? Or not close YouTube, the page.
Well, I think you just it was mine. So let's continue. I just closed it because I was going to go post it. It's fine.
That literally happens to me every time. So don't. many times. I'm glad to be joining you all this morning. Well, it's not morning for everyone.
Really, for you.
It is. It is.
Oh.
Well, thank you, Katie. And okay, I'll share my screen and let's see how this goes. I'll let everyone many times. All right.
Jess is here too. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Jess. Jess Bell. Jess, do you want to introduce yourself? Give your mic on.
Her mic's off.
Okay.
Better?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jess Bell. I teach high school ESL in Indianapolis, Indiana at a large school. And I've been a part of ELL Chat Book Club for a while now. Super fun. I learn a lot.
Thank you. And Jess Bell and Carlota Holder did the video chat last week. And if you didn't see that, you want to watch that. They shared some great ideas and links to past texts that we reviewed, that we've read in the ELL chat. Awesome. Thank you, Jess.
No problem.
All right. So welcome to this week's book chat, ELL chat book club on the comprehensible input and strategies SIOP components. And we're also going to talk about some other things SIOP related too. So not limited to these topics. So Ton, I'm going to kick it off to you to talk about comprehensible input.
Great. If you can go to the next slide. There are 3 parts of comprehensible input. The first one is appropriate speech, and then clear explanation of academic tasks, and a variety of techniques used. I'm just going to focus on just a few really quickly. In the next slide, you're going to see Alyssa Owen. She is a teacher, an American teacher working in China, and she posted this. Maybe I should share my screen then.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Am I already doing it? Oh, share my screen. She posted about how we can videotape ourselves, giving instruction, just to monitor how we are fast, we're speaking, our tone, our use of idioms, our use of colloquial language, how are we using our language? And so she recommended that. And the next slide, this is my slide where I talk about like recording step-by-step instructions to make it really clear for kids. And I love this because the power that it allows kids to pause, to replay, and to listen to multiple opportunities. They can even adjust their speed, and they can even, if the teacher speaks clearly enough, they can usually have it auto-translated in YouTube. Are you seeing my screen, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. This is a video that I created with a science teacher when I was at school in Vietnam, and this is an actual video. I won't push play because then it'll just repeat because you'll hear it, but it's actually us teaching our kids how to make a graph on Google Sheets where they report. So that's an example. And instead of kids saying, hey, Mr. Tan, how do you do this several times, they just watch the video. And if the kids who really needed help, then we gave them like support with that. In our next slide, Carlota was talking about clear expectations and academic tasks. And I love this little tweet. She says, like, my face after finished giving directions, and the student asked me what to do. That is something that happens to me all the time. And it just reminds us, like, we need to model. And someone else said, when you model and you write instructions, try to draw images so the kids can follow along as well. I said, oh, that's a great idea. I think that's such a low prep way to make content and academic tasks really clear for kids. Not just writing, but then modeling it. There's no prep you need to do. It's just showing kids. And I think this is really great. This slide is about when to model. And I said, you should model instructions. Consider model instructions if the task is new, if there's lots of steps, it's really complicated. If the written instructions are confusing, and if the student just doesn't understand the instructions. And so these are my recommendations for that. Would Katie, Jess, and Emily, do you want to add anything to anything I said here?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Or a thought that I was thinking of, because in my context, we always highly model and highly scaffold for kids. And I remember when we were reading Tanya's book, that's when she had something about, kind of doing that gradual release of responsibility, and constantly doing that is actually at a detriment to kids because you're doing it too much. And so I guess my question is, where do we find that balance of, yeah, I want to make sure my tasks are clear every single time. And I want to make sure that I go through and I model and show kids exactly what is needed so that they can be successful. But then I also kind of want to maybe leave room for interpretation sometimes, or see what they can do to kind of bring in that element where Tanya talks about observing. And so where's the balance in that? Just what are your ideas on that?
I tend to also model on a document camera. And so like if I introduce a new task, like we did rhetorical analysis of some pieces. And so not only did I like model the directions and model the task, like when it's a really complicated activity, we did it together on a document camera for everyone to look at the first time. And then the next time we would, like, I modeled part of that. Like I would do, okay, now I'm going to do this section, which is more complicated. You're going to do the rest. And then eventually, you know, it's a task that will repeat multiple times. And so they will have to be responsible for doing the entire part on their own, but then they've done it together. And I always have them keep those ones we did together, not just, like, so they can look at it as an example. Like when I get stuck, oh, I can't find the rhetorical devices. Okay, well, how did we do this? When we filled out a SOAPs organizer for speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, find your one that we did together, look at what it was. How's that going to help you on your own? So we're currently analyzing some Shakespeare sonnets, getting ready to, and that's super fun with high school EL students. So we are modeling lots of document camera time this week in my room and next week. So, but I'm very conscious to also model complicated tasks and not just the directions.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a good fit when you're teaching something that students will have to do repeatedly over and over. Yeah. Okay, here's another question. What would you recommend to teachers when you're doing extensive modeling like that to help maintain the kind of teacher, to limit the teacher talk and have students to interact while you're doing modeling, so that you're not in a situation where you're talking so much and they're not able to interact or get their talk time in?
In that kind of a situation, I view myself more as the facilitator. So like I am asking questions and then I'm recording their answers, but like they're still involved in the cognitive thought process and developing what it is that we're going to say. I might help them rephrase it when we write down. I might draw attention to a specific area. Sometimes I ask for does anybody else have an answer about this part before we move on, and then I'll draw attention there if we need. But I really try to facilitate that and not be the lecturer.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Good questions. Anything else about comprehensible input? Any other thoughts? Questions? Wonderings?
I just love that idea of recording yourself. So there was the challenge that came up that I think it was actually from the Virtual Institute. And I remember tweeting about that, and it was such a popular tweet because it really is such a great idea that if you want to really test how good you are at comprehensible input, record yourself teaching and then put it on mute and see if somebody else can figure out what you're teaching about. And so, you know, the use of the visuals and the use of the written steps and all of those things contribute to somebody being able to understand without even hearing what you're saying. Gestures, all those good things we do to teach ELs.
And another thing that Annie Rance, who is the presenter on your virtual institute, I remember this, Katie, she says a way to kind of switch it up is to turn the camera on the students. So while you're teaching, record them and their reactions, their signals, and look and see if they're engaged. And what points are they engaged? So you can kind of reflect and do more of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Salva did that. If you guys remember, it was in the last months where she was teaching. She recorded her lesson, and that's when she figured out one of her students were sleeping. And she noticed that, she thought the lesson was perfect, and she felt so good about it. So that was one of my takeaways from comprehensible input, that it's not about me feeling good as how well the lesson was, but how did I go about making sure that the student met the objection of the language or the content. And she noticed that her student was sleeping the whole time. So she had to do it all over again. And she blogged about it too. So if you guys go to Carol Salva's blog post, you'll see her blog, her video where her student was actually sleeping. And it's a good way to see, you know, sometimes we're so into our teaching that we feel so good about what we're doing, our planning, our objections, and then boom, there's somebody in the back way off topic or sleeping the whole time. So it's a good way.
To add to that, Emily, it was so a few weeks ago, I was bringing my iPad in to record my own instruction just to watch it, and then I noticed kids like doing things like this, like, and they were so distracted.
They
And
want
then
to shine.
of course, they're fifth graders. Wait, I know. I actually didn't tell them how I wanted them to behave when there's an iPad. So the next day, I actually showed them a clip of like, so I noticed you actually do this. You kind of pop out. You were singing ABCs in and out, just to, like pop in and out. And I said, well, this is one behavior. What kind of behavior do you think I want you to have? And why do you, when I record myself, why should you not have those behaviors? And like, oh yeah, because we're distracted on the iPad, and it's not really for. Then you actually can't teach us. I'm like, oh, exactly. So as you start recording your kids, just communicate that and like have that be part of the lesson as well. Yeah. Don't just do what I did. Click, record. Oh, hot.
It's also a great opportunity, like you said, Emily, when Carol noticed that, to go back to kind of cycle back to the lesson preparation part, because if you realize, okay, this was lacking, you can't necessarily on the spot produce something that would have made it more comprehensible for students. If you go back and think about your planning, you can think, okay, well, this was the problem. And so this is something that I need to plan and prepare for in order to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Again. Hey guys, did you notice Carlota's here? Hi, Carlota.
Hi, Carlota.
Hi.
Good morning.
My baby's still sleeping, so yay! I thought I would join on here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to like piggyback what you guys were saying about like video recording. I had some like title and NESP funds left over last year, so I purchased. It's called a swivel. Have you guys heard of that? So the swivel is, we have 2 in our building now, but the swivel is you put an iPad on there and then you have a microphone and then it tracks you based on the voice. So it'll move with you. So if you're in the corner, then the swivel is going to record you from that side. If you're over here, it's going to record you from that side. So
yeah, one of our PD presenters had that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we've been using it like with teachers so that they can view the videos and then kind of reflect on their instruction, and it's been like pretty powerful. The video that I posted a few weeks ago, I don't remember when it was, we use the swivel to track her. There's all
like the second graders and the bugs.
Yes, the second graders in the insects unit. So that is a really good tool if you guys have the funds to purchase it or request to purchase it for, I noted it down as professional development when I used it.
So if you have a teacher do that, Carlota, what kind of questions would you ask them to kind of help the average teacher reflect on their instruction?
I would have them, I would ask, the first question I would ask is engagement, but that's probably because it's like ingrained in my head. Like that's a focus that we're on right now as a school. So I would ask like, how many students did you see that were engaged when you did it? What is the difference of engagement from when you were like aggressively monitoring to when you view the video and you're looking at students? And then I would probably, and then I would ask them about the language, like what kind of language were you using? What kind of language did you hear from the students? In that particular video, since they were on the carpet, I could have put, it comes with multiple microphones, so I could have put microphones on the carpet to pick up more of what the kids were saying, but I was more focused on the teacher instruction. So, if I was really focused on like what the language the students were using, I could have done that.
How did you create a culture of teachers wanting to record themselves?
That's a great question. Kind of not a choice. No. So we do, at my school, we do like walkthroughs weekly. And then we do one-on-one coaching. So in order for a coach to provide one-on-one coaching, they have to see you. So if they can't make it into your classroom, then they will just come up and set up the swivel, and then that's what they will base their one-on-one coaching from. I think that actually teachers, since we already had this culture of there's going to be multiple observers coming through your classroom, then the recording wasn't like, probably was a better, like they enjoy that better. It's less, I don't know, tense, I guess, for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Also, I think then the kids, I mean, I've had a guest visitor this year who works with behavior support. And when she's there, the kids behave amazingly because there's another person in the room. And so some of the challenges that we may have on an average day wouldn't show up because of her physical presence in the room. So if I was to use a video camera to record an average day and then have that coach help me look at those behaviors, she might see something different. I mean, she was there saying, these kids are amazing. They were, and they usually are, but there's also days where we have a lot of off-task behavior and it looks a little different. So that's cool to kind of have the camera rather than a legitimate administrator in the room. Because I think that does, I mean, that's a research thing. When there's somebody in the room, behaviors change. So, and
some of our school leaders are also instructional coaches. So it looks different when like I'm in the room than when like she's in the room. They want to be, on their top behavior. So yeah.
Nice. Oh, I don't know if anyone listening to this has done national board certification, but that was when I went through the process and I got certified. But video is a big part of that. And I think having to do those so frequently made it to where it was kind of a natural part of what I would do to reflect and improve teaching and learning in the classroom. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to share my screen again, and let's talk about strategies. And I've got several screens open. I apologize. I'm running here and there. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Yes.
No.
Okay.
You.
All right.
As you're finding that, can I ask Carlota another question?
Yeah.
Carlota, use the swivel. How can it follow teachers quickly enough? Because some teachers move pretty fast.
It moves with the voice of the teacher.
And what if the teacher's talking and then say, okay, turn and talk. And then there's like lots of kids talking.
Yeah, that it'll just pick up where the teacher is, like in the video example I shared, the teacher is aggressively monitoring. So it only picks up the students that she's like down and close by. Does that make sense?
It's tied to the microphone, right?
Yeah.
Like it's tied to the teacher's microphone. So when the teacher moves.
To you.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
They have them on Amazon, the swivel stands. I'm not.
But you need the part that moves is the little robot-y thing.
Yeah.
So
what's the cost of something like that? Is it very expensive?
So the one that I got was like so we have two in our building. We have one, mine has 3 microphones. So a teacher and then like 2 small ones that I could put, because my thinking was more like, I want to record them at small group instruction. That's where most of our differentiation happens. And then the other swivel has 1 microphone and then 4 different like student microphones that you can place in different places. So each one of those has a different cost. I want to say the one that I ended up purchasing was like $600.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a substantial purchase there.
Yeah.
well,
my money, guys.
I used title funds.
Yeah, I had funds left over and they were like for PD. And so I was like, how can I make this purchase the reason for professional development? And I was able to do that. So
So I purchased one, and the school purchased one for me. Well, it was in the order for purchasing, and I was like, $800. That's a lot. I have my own iPad. Let me just stop. And I currently use my own iPad to record really close to me. And when I have kids on the rug and I'm sitting in one spot, it picks it up pretty clearly, and it does the same thing. Because I'm situated, I'm like telling myself, okay, I need to sit for this mini lesson.
It's really cool though if you like. So we use it across the network and across our schools. So we're able to like make groups, and other people are able to see other teachers' videos, right? So like we're also like building that culture of like sharing our instruction, whether it's good or whether we're learning from it.
That's awesome. I would like to have that.
I think that's a really great culture. Just like Carol sharing that video on her blog, like, oh, this kid is asleep in her room while she's teaching. I think that so many teachers have that like fear of putting anything out there that doesn't show them in a 100% perfect positive light. Because, you know, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. Like kids do things, right? And so I think that having that really open, like where you're not afraid to share like the good and the bad, right, is really important for helping teachers grow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, it's your screen, Allyson. We got your deck.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk about strategies component 4, and you know, we could certainly go off topic. I'm going to address some questions that we received on Twitter, so we'll do that as well. But these are our 3 features of the strategies component. So ample opportunities provide students to use learning strategies. So about the strategies students are using, scaffolding techniques. So how do we scaffold up for students, and what techniques are we using? And then providing a variety of questions or tasks that promote higher order thinking skills. So one of the questions that we received from the Twitter chat are, what are some key strategies to teach those who are new to SIOP? Sweepers has not taken off. Okay, so we've added the hyperlink, the link to the slide deck. So this is hyperlinked if you want to check out Sweepers. There's a video that Mary Ellen Vogt did on this technique.
What does it stand for? Because I know it, but it's not familiar right now.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay. Survey question, predict, read, respond. Okay.
Survey question, predict, read, respond, and summarize. Also on the slide deck, I've linked this to some resources we have if you're interested in Sweepers. Also, in addition to the video from Mary Ellen Vogt. So some good stuff. But here's some ideas, and this was shared on Twitter this week, or a couple weeks ago when we did strategies. I guess it was last week. Is to use images to promote using strategies to kind of wean students toward texts, and using strategies. Again, this is also hyperlinked, but the image you see here is from the New York Times, and it's a section they have called "What's Going On in This Picture."
Yeah.
And they post these, and they have some actual questions that they have on the website you could use, or something else I shared on Twitter were these sentence frames. So questions, you would ask the questions, obviously, to go with the sentence frames, but you could use the image and ask them to infer. So in the image, what do you notice about the image? What do you think is happening? Why do you think this is happening? What from the picture tells you that? What from your prior knowledge makes you think that? And then we've got some sentence frames you could use to help students to have with output of those their observations. And then the idea is to move from images to short chunks of text. And I did this with my 3rd graders a couple years ago. We used some images similar to this. They're very interesting images. And then I took us to a chunk of text from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I've been reading that to them, so they were familiar with the context. And we just took out like about 3 sentences from the text, such a good descriptive text, and applied those same questions. So some questioning techniques, some techniques you're asked about more ideas for strategies. So asking students to infer, to defend, to justify. Here's some more to make connections, to ask questions. And again, these sentence frames you're seeing are hyperlinked on the slide deck. I don't know if any of you have seen Simon's cat videos on YouTube. Have you guys seen any of those?
I haven't.
Okay.
Hey, Allyson, before you change, will you go back to that slide for just a second?
Yeah, this one or that one before?
The one with the kids swimming. So this, with this tweet, I was like, that is an amazing idea. And I was working on developing sentence complexity with my intermediate ELs. And so we used this picture, which was still the picture of the week this week. And my kids were like,
You're breaking.
it was so interesting because oh, sorry. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine.
We looked at the picture and like I had them generate like what they thought was happening in the picture. And then when we used a bunch of those sentence frames. But can I tell you that when I was like, well, I think after they were talking, I was like, I think this is a gym class and these students are swimming in school, like in class. And my kids were like, no, there's no way. They wouldn't put them like the open water. They didn't have the vocabulary to express open water, but they were horrified that they would be swimming at school, not in a pool. And like that would never happen. And then like the kids that were brand new that had moved since the semester started, those kids didn't have swimming yet because we have a pool, so every student has to have swimming. They were just horrified that school would swim. But we used those sentence frames as a great like springboard to help us write. We also use like adjectives and adverbs. So we're on purpose developing sentence complexity. And we used it as those sentence frames to really help us springboard that activity. So I love this. I hadn't used this website before and I used it this week because, you know, Twitter is awesome.
Yeah.
Share things.
That's not true. We've used New York before.
I've always used like the National Geographic one. So if if we used that when we were together, I didn't remember that site.
Yeah, we did.
I always use National Geographic picture of the day.
And this one is actually promotes all language domains because students are looking at the picture, they're discussing the picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's opportunities for writing with the sentence stems. And if I'm not mistaken, a week later or the day after, it tells you really what's happening in the picture. So you can read it out loud and tell the students what's happening. So they're listening to it and they can even make connections whether they were right or wrong. So it's an excellent website.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times, you know, teachers are mistaken that like, oh, these are pictures and it's not enough for some of our students. But there's so much value in pictures, and even picture books have really high lexile levels. So it's just like how you use it, right, in order to promote the higher order thinking that RELs can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's using visual literacy, which is, you know, highly valued in our language arts curriculum. Anyway, just scaffolding for students. So using the images to take the text. And ultimately, at least with my students, when I used this, the goal was that in their independent reading, they would use these strategies. So I would even have them talk with a partner afterward. How did you make an inference? And what did you base that inference on? You know, what from the text told you this? And anyway, so it's just a way to scaffold up. Yeah. So I'm showing my screen, and here's what we were talking about. So you've got your image, and a week later, they keep you in suspense. A week later, they post it, what it is.
Yeah.
And so this is from South Korean children swimming, and it's an event that they had. Now I do really suggest that you preview the images before you share them with students, especially to make sure they're age appropriate, because these do come from the news, and some of the images can be shocking. They don't ever post anything that's inappropriate for the public, but you know, there's some violence in some images, so just make sure you check those. Also, on the New York Times website, they actually allow you and your class to be a part of the discussion. And, you know, you can check that out and see they'll have classes that have already had discussions about this image, for example, and making.
Cool. So it can be a global thing. So it's a global thing.
Yes.
And Jess, I added to the slides the National Geographic picture of the day. So thanks for adding.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a great site.
Great. That's a cool image. Yeah. And yeah, it's really nice to capture them, just like we want, you know, students to be hooked into their reading, you know, with a good hook. These images have some good hooks to engage students in some good conversation, and adults in good conversation.
Is this free, the National Geographic one?
Yes, it's free.
And
I need to it. So
they change it every day.
Yeah.
Cool. The Simon Katz video, I'm not sure if I can show a video. I'm just not going to try that on Google Hangout. But I've got this hyperlinked here, or you can just do a search for Simon's Cat videos on YouTube. They're hilarious, and they have 0 to a tiny bit of language. So it's kind of like that level field of accessibility to look at something and then to comment on them, just like images would. This video has the cat's messing with her owner or his owner, trying to wake him up and be fed. And I've used this image and then the video and stopped and started it. It's like 2 minutes or something, to talk through some of these strategies that students can use as well, making connections and asking questions. Why is, sounds like there's a lot going on even in just in this image. Like why is there a bunch of why are there a bunch of cat toys under the bed, and what does that tell you about the owner? And we would make observations about the image, and same kind of observations you might make about a text as well, and connections. Some people would respond and say, I've never had a cat before, but I did, I used to watch a bird, or something, but they can make some kind of connection or, that kind of thing. And it's a great way to find out what their background knowledge, what their prior knowledge is, and even think if you're building background. But check out these videos. They're hilarious. Simon's cat videos. Kids love them. Adults love them. They're short. And again, the idea is to take them from this to text and then toward independence with using the strategies. Cool. All right, another question from Twitter. How can we help students realize that the strategies that we use in pull-out language class or in classes can be applied across content areas? So for the group, what do you think? What are some ways that we can help students realize that the strategies can be used outside of the class?
For me, is when you're actually teaching the strategy, you're actually using content that they are learning in the classroom. So they see that what you're teaching them in that moment can be applied when they are not with you as a teacher of ESL, but you can apply it to any content they're learning. And also making sure that the classroom teacher is aware of what strategy we're teaching. That way they can also back it up in the classroom. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Another thing too is to make connections to the content areas. Let's say if you're teaching language arts and you're teaching prediction strategies, you may want to make that intentional connection to creating a hypothesis in science. Of course, we're talking age appropriate and what their content they're learning in science would be, but that the same strategies, same techniques are applied across to other content areas. So we might make a prediction, and this is how we do it with this text or this image, and this is the same thing you're going to do with an experiment.
Yeah, agreed. I was thinking of a student I was tutoring in the evenings and afternoons. And the other day we were watching a video about the carbon cycle. And so I was helping him through that. But at the end of it, I said, okay, in the future, when you watch a video on YouTube and it's science-based, what are some strategies we can do to understand it? And so he said, oh yeah, well, we pause a lot and we turn down the speed, and we also make mind maps. So I was showing him mind mapping, how to do that. And so there's like a split screen. One screen is the content that we're trying to teach them, but the bigger screen, the more important screen, I think, or the equally important screen side is that we're asking them, what are the strategies we're using to make this comprehensible? What can we do? How can we use that in the future? And so when I leave like a tutoring session, I'm happy because I feel like, okay, this student will know that was one step closer to becoming independent.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we just rush to help, and sometimes I need to tell myself, help, but also pause.
Productive
That's a good point. That there's that metacognitive element of teaching, having kids reflect on what their brain is actually doing that's helping them. So then they can kind of really be aware of it, because it's not just do this because I'm telling you to do it. It's do it because this is actually helping to facilitate your learning.
Uh-huh.
And that's where like the strategies that come in, because when students reflect on them, they're aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. And then model, walk them through a role play. When you're in another class, how could we use this strategy? How could you use this tool, this strategy on your own? And have some of those discussions with your students.
I think part of that conversation too can be sharing with other teachers. These are strategies that we use, or like, so that other teachers know. Like if your social studies and your science teachers know, like we use race, right? They know to remind students or ask all students, like, well, how could you use a race organizer here? Or how could you use that strategy? Right. And so I think that it's not just teaching, it is teaching the students to, be confident in using the strategy independently, but it also needs to be expressing these are the strategies. You might need to, remind them about using them, in other contexts to help students see how those things applied in other areas.
One of my biggest takeaways, and it was just 2 lines from this entire chapter, was that phrase, you're not just teaching them the strategy, but what is the strategy? When do you use it and how to use it? To me, that line was just, that's it. You have thousands of strategies coming to us, but if we're just teaching them the strategy, we don't teaching them how and when to use them, it's just wasting the time for the moment and not empowering them for the classroom use. So that to me was just the highlight of the chapter.
That's great. And I love that tweet you shared. It was just so clear how you laid that out. And I'm searching for it right now. But I don't think I'm going to find it.
I think sometimes we just get caught out of, we need to teach a strategy. Here's a strategy. And again, we get so many strategies thrown onto us that sometimes we even get lost on how many or which ones to use. But if we teach them the actual purpose of why are we teaching them and when to do it, I think that's just empowering them more so.
Yeah.
I think like other teachers in other content areas just assume students know how to use those strategies, where, you see the word explicit a lot of times in the SIOP book, where we need to be explicit when telling them, oh, these are your strategies. Which one are you going to use today? Or if they're having a hard time, hey, remember these strategies? Can you use one of those? Right? Like we have this terrible idea. I mean, I guess it's terrible sometimes, but to just assume, since they know the strategy, they also know when to use it.
But it's also, it just connects to what, when we're talking about all these things, in my brain, it's just like, it's all of these SIOP components. And that's why it's so important to learn this framework, because, lately I've been using the PQA strategy a lot, and it's been really successful in helping, especially my kids who are those emerging speakers and my newcomers, because it's a strategy that they can use. I show them how when you're asked a question, and especially in writing, like a written response, you can pull these words from the written question to give you a great start to answer it. It's like the language is there for you to use, even if you don't have it on your own. But in my language objective, it's PQA, like answer questions using PQA on their directions. It says that. When we review it, like we talk about it, and it's in the language I'm using. It's the comprehensible input of showing them and giving them that, what we talked about at the beginning of this chat, giving them the modeling of how to do that, because I put it on the DocCam, and here's the question. What words could we borrow from this? And we highlighted it, and we did that all together. And so it's helped them significantly. One student in particular is dual identified with a communication disorder and as an English learner. He's been in my class. I've taught him in kindergarten. He's now a 5th grader, and he's still emerging in his English because of this kind of dual identification. And often what he says or what he writes, it just doesn't make sense. And so I taught him PQA, and the quality of his written responses has improved so much. And I always am encouraging students to answer with compound and complex sentences. And he's able to do that. And I took his work from my pullout class and showed it to the special education teacher who does writing with him. And she was like, what? And it was just so cool to be able to show that, yes, because PQA is a pretty simple strategy to use, but it gives him the power to really improve the quality of his answer, and gives him something that for a child who is an emergent speaker and also has a disability related to his language, that he can do that to be successful. And he he can do that. He doesn't need me to help him every time because it's a pretty simple thing. Look at the question, borrow some of the words to get you started, and it sets you up to have an answer that makes sense. And so it really is the coming together of all of those components. It's not just one at a time.
And remind us what PQA is.
Put the question in the answer. So when you have a question like, what is your favorite book? Then they answer my favorite book, and they just pull words from the question into their answer. And so it's similar to, it's kind of like a precursor to race. I was texting with Jess and Carlota the other day and asking about kind of where to go next. So that's kind of a higher level where you're having them, actually cite a text and give evidence and things. But PQA is very simple. It's mostly like training kids or supporting them to answer incomplete sentences. So if you say, what is something you like to do on the weekend? They don't just say, play with my friends. They would answer, something I like to do on the weekends is play with my friends. And if they're, with all the testing that's going on now, they're doing their SBAC and we finished our language testing, but strategies like that can definitely support them in demonstrating higher level language skills, and also just give them practice with using more of those words and expanding the words that they're using.
I can't remember how we got started talking about it, but Carlota and I were talking about teaching her teachers strategies to use because she coaches her staff. And one of the things, like, we talked about it as a toolbox metaphor. Do you remember this, Carlota? And it was just like, it's such a shift, because then I started framing that for my kids. Like, this is a strategy you have in your toolbox. If I taught not high school kids, I would probably even like put like a tool belt like on my board and put like strategies.
Whatever, you can still do that with your high school kids.
Dude, I'm not going to. They love those sticker charts, okay? They are like, you could update my sticker chart.
You could find an analogy of like, okay, if you have your cell phone and you have all these different apps, depending on what you want to do, you choose a specific app.
Choose the right app. Yeah. But I think it's really helpful in like how we get kids to realize that they know strategies. Now they have to know how to pick the right one. But like that tools in my toolbox, but okay, apps on the cell phone. That one I'll take.
But I think one of the important pieces too is that we as teachers are using that language and expecting that students can incorporate words like the strategy I'm using, because there's a lot of tweets when we talk about comprehensible input about the rate at which you talk and making sure that your language is clear and that you're using your sentences aren't too complex. And I agree with that. But I also tweeted that it's very important to make sure that you're still using higher level terms. You're just explaining them and making those comprehensible, because what we don't want is to dumb down what we're saying and not hold students accountable to be able to understand language like, well, which strategy would you select in order to blah, 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 blah when you're reading? They can get that, but it's our job to do all that scaffolding and making it comprehensible so that becomes part of what they know. And then, it's in our content objective. We can go back to our language objective. This is what you should be doing. Remember, you need to use this strategy to blah, blah, blah. And it's just there for them. They see it, they hear it. And so it becomes part of what they can do, which is academic work, right? They're familiar with things like that.
Fabulous.
I think it's so funny. I don't know how many people are live who are watching us, but it doesn't matter because I'm getting a lot of PD from you guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, and so another question from Twitter, and I think several of us might want to speak to this, but one of the questions was, I had a question recently about guided reading framework suggesting to not pre-teach vocabulary. And so this relates to the building background feature about vocabulary, and how does this relate to the key vocabulary feature on SIOP? So, Tan, do you want to share your slides, or do you want me to share what we have here?
Yes, that's not a problem. So I was thinking about like pre-teaching vocabulary and not pre-teaching vocabulary, and I was thinking of how to share this out And I think it's really pre-teaching unfamiliar words or teaching vocabulary mean-making strategies, because we really want kids to be independent in the future. There's no way that we can teach kids all the words they'll need in the text in the future, but we can give them tools. And so I think pre-teaching is kind of like out of context vocabulary instruction, even though it's going to be connected back to the topic. But when we give them the vocabulary words at the beginning, it might be time taken away from actually giving them time to actually deal with the words, use the strategies of looking words in the beginning, looking the words at the end to figure out what the word in the middle might mean. And so I think I use the analogy of climbing a mountain as in context vocabulary instruction, because when kids are climbing up, let's say the beginning part of the mountain of the text, it's pretty easy, for example. But when it gets a little harder, they start taking out their ropes and then they attach it to things to help them get up the hill. And so we just remind kids that, okay, there are times where this is a great opportunity for us to use vocabulary strategies that'll help you in the future when I'm not there to support you, regardless of the text. So I saw this from Kiting and Bears. And she goes through this order with kids, and she goes, okay, so you ask this question, and there's one side that you discover. And you start with the beginning, like, have you heard this word before? And then it helps kids with like the basic knowledge. And it goes all the way down. And my favorite is like, what is the rest of the sentence or the passage that should help you? I did a little burger thing, which is teaching context clues. And I say, well, you know what? Let's look at clues in the beginning, and let's look at the clues after the vocabulary word. And those clues might be there, it might not, but if they're there, we're able to use those clues to really help us understand the unfamiliar vocabulary word. And so that's like my little push for like thinking, maybe we have to, teaching vocabulary is great, but how much time are we spending teaching vocabulary? And how much time is that taken away from kids actually trying to use the strategies?
All of it reminds me of the proverb about, if you teach a man to fish, it's all that. It's empowering kids to be able to do things on their own, right? And so like our standard for vocabulary is not that students know the definitions of words, it's that they can figure out the meaning of unknown words. And that's what we need to facilitate for them to be able to do, which I think is, it's challenging, but it's teaching them those strategies so that when they are reading on their own, they can have those strategies in their tool belt or in their apps, and they can know kind of what strategies to employ so that they can figure out the words that don't make sense, because they're not always going to have us. The goal is that they're reading independently and they're doing these things when they're not sitting in our classroom next to a teacher. So they need to be given the tools to do it independently.
I think if you're following like a guided reading curriculum, some of those words that they're saying not to pre-teach, it is because it's a part of the lesson for them to practice context clues. But there may be other words, right? Like we have to be conscious of, there may be other words in this text that my students don't know because they're English language learners, and I can pre-teach those. So I feel like there's this interpretation of like not pre-teaching vocabulary. And I feel like me and Jess had an issue with this when we did Common Core stuff when we were co-teaching. You remember this, Jess? They're like, no, you can't pre-teach vocabulary. They have to figure everything else out on their own. And we're like, no, this is bad for ELs. It definitely depends on the purpose of the lesson, which requires a lot of like internalization and looking through, right, like that guided reading group or guided reading curriculum and knowing this is the purpose. So I'm not going to pre-teach these vocabulary words, but looking at the text ahead of time, maybe these words I am, because it's not a part of the context clues lesson, and I need to build my students' background knowledge.
That's the bottom line, that knowing your students, because the person that created the curriculum may have some built-in biases that may think, oh, these kids need to know these words, when in fact, he or she, the creator, does not know what words students needs to know. So a matter of like, yes, pre-planning and looking at the text. We know our students, what do they need, what do they need to learn, and it provide what they need, not what the text is telling you to follow up. But that's my opinion.
It also seems like it could be kind of along the lines of the separation of the content versus the language objective, that when you're teaching the content, you do need to present some key terms and explain them so students understand. But then when they're independently reading and they're kind of doing that on their own, they need to have the skills to figure out additional unknown words. And so I kind of see a line there where when you're focusing on the content, you do want to present terms. And when you're focusing on teaching students language skills and strategies of reading and understanding that and building language, that you have that piece too.
So what I see is like what I cringe because I used to do this. I used to think, okay, pre-teach. You have to pre-teach. So I tried to pre-teach all the vocabulary words that are unknown, and that's definitely not something we should do too. Because what Carlota said, like some words we should be intentional on how much we teach, because some of the words have context clues. Like what you said, Katie, sometimes the words are content that we do need to know. So it's just really having that lens of like, what words do we need to teach? Like Emily said, knowing our kids, which one should we teach? Maybe not all of them, because that's some teachers do that. I'm like I did that.
And Ton, I'm sharing the slide that you shared with me a little while ago about the burger or the sandwich. Do you want to talk about that? The word gaps by Kylene Beers.
Yeah, it's just a process of like when she's thinking about this as like a conferencing, or when a student encounters a word they don't know. There's a process of going from beginning, from identifying what they don't know, basic knowledge, all the way to helping them get the context clues. And Kylene is so amazing how she makes it so simple for us to follow.
Yes, love her book.
It is time. Like, we've been spending an hour, so we don't want to take any more of your time. And this is like a lot of great information for teachers out there. How do you, Ally, do you want to end this? Thank you.
Sure. Or does anyone else have anything they want to add or chat about?
No, it was super fun.
Answer
Thanks, guys.
everybody's questions.
Let's see. We had another question. And I'm just going to read it to you. So if school is not on board with SIOP, where would be a good place to begin in your own classroom? So if the school's not on board yet with SIOP, how do you begin in your own classroom?
Just choose the instructional period is what, is suggested, and start there. And then, you can always do SIOP in your classroom. It doesn't have to be a school-wide thing. Like, yes, it would benefit all students if it was, but I would start with my classroom, collect the data, compare it to other teachers, and then present that data to administrators on why other teachers should maybe get on board. But there shouldn't be any reason for an administrator to say, like, no, you can't do that, because SIOP is good teaching. It's effective teaching. It's special, but there's not something like, I don't know how to say that.
Well, and I would recommend if a teacher is feeling like they're on their own and SIOP is not being facilitated on a greater level by staff or admin, just start at the beginning. We're kind of modeling how you can take a book and work through it and, start at the beginning. Is that Julie Andrews, Sound of Music, right? Start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, or whatever. Like, start with content and language objectives. I remember being a classroom teacher and just feeling like I do too many things throughout my day. I teach kindergarten. We do a different thing every 10 minutes. Putting up objectives it seems I can't do that. And for the longest time, I didn't. And it wasn't really until I did the SIOP Institute and really dove into the text that I started consistently doing it. And it's made a huge difference in my organization of my lessons. I point to them multiple times to redirect students. And that small piece makes a difference. And then once you get the hang of that small piece, try a different small piece. You don't necessarily have to do everything all at once, because that is a lot. But you can do it, and it doesn't need to be something that every teacher in the building is doing. You can do it on your own, and then you can share how great it is and convince other people that they should start trying things too.
I've also heard people say, looking at the 8 components of SIOP, start with one that you're already using or something that's really familiar or you're interested in. And of the 8 components, people usually say the only component that really they have a question mark about is comprehensible input. And maybe because they haven't heard it phrased that way before, it's making things understandable. But the other components, lesson preparation, building background, all of our components, they're kind of things we may do already, but it's more about enriching those practices and doing them more purposefully. So pick one. Maybe to start with, lesson preparation is a great one to start with, but something that is familiar to you or is interesting to you. And I would even say, too, find someone, in your building, whether it's a different grade level or a different content class, but a friend maybe that you work with, to go in and do this together, not in the same classroom, but hey, let's focus in on building background, and that way you have someone to share some things, about what you're practicing, what you're doing in the classroom, and even going to your admin with that would be great.
Something
or
that
share it on Twitter and get other people to see it and build you up.
Yeah.
Emily, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, something that I've been doing is whenever I do a lot of inclusion, not really co-teaching because we don't co-plan, but whenever I see a teacher doing something related to SIOP, I will walk over after the lesson and be like, oh, that was so SIOP. That was such a SIOP lesson, or that was such a SIOP strategy. And just embed that conversation. They don't even realize they're using the SIOP model. And just making them conscious that little detail that they did, that little scaffolding, it was SIOP. So when you say that, it makes them realize that they're doing good and they can do even better. So
yeah, I think a lot of teachers are doing things that are already aligned to SIOP.
Yes.
They just don't know that it's part of it.
Right.
Because in SIOP there are other things from other teaching that you can use.
Again, because SIOP is just good teaching. Just that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's still my favorite thing from the conference last year. It's refining. SIOP really helps you refine good instructional practices.
Mm-hmm. And it's good teaching for all students, like you said, but it is important that we do stress that it's vital for our English learners, so yeah.
And it's good to be
vital.
Consistent too. Consistent and intentional, just like you were saying, explicit and intentional. Those are the 2 words that stand out chapter after chapter. Be explicit, be intentional. So when teachers hear that they're doing something related to SIOP, just continue doing that. And that consistency helps students.
I would just want to add that, what Allyson said about being vital, it is vital for English language learners to perform rigorous academic tasks. That is why it's so vital, so that they have those same opportunities as native English speakers in your classroom and across academic content.
Agreed. 10th graders should not be learning, even if they're beginners, the language of the school.
Right.
Here, this is the color.
No.
Yeah, box of food. I'm going to have you learn all the different colors. Here are scissors.
Oh, that kills me. Yes.
Kills me so much. Put them in a science classroom.
Waste of time. Yes.
Waste of time. Intentions are good. Oh man, but waste of time, because the opportunity to be in content classes gives them the opportunity to use language, to read, write, speak, listen.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%.
Yay. Well, with that, shall we?
I gotta go. I gotta take my little one to a
Okay.
scavenger hunt.
You're always off doing fun things.
I know. I gotta keep this girl busy. She's ready to go. I got the shoes on and we're ready to go. But thank you guys. I've learned so much from all of you, and it's been a fantastic Meta ELL book club. So
Fabulous. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks for facilitating.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Thanks, Allyson.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.